The house on Cedarwood Lane blended in with the rest of the affluent suburban neighborhood, a picture of calm and security. The perfectly manicured lawn, freshly painted shutters, and carefully tended flower beds all gave the illusion of peace. Inside, though, the air was thick with tension, the kind that was hard to see but impossible to ignore. In every room, silence seemed to hang just a little too long, the conversations between the four people who lived there always veering away from anything personal. Samantha, Sam, preferred the quiet. At 26, she had learned to find solace in solitude. She'd always been the quiet one, more interested in sketching the world around her than engaging in it. Since her father remarried 2 years ago, Sam's isolation had only deepened. Her stepmother Cheryl wasn't overtly cruel, but she was distant. Every interaction between them felt like a performance, where Sam never quite got her lines right. There was no warmth, no connection, just an unspoken tension that hovered between them. Sam's father, once a constant in her life, now seemed distracted, his attentions always elsewhere. Then there was Ethan. Cheryl's son was everything Sam was not: confident, charismatic, and naturally able to draw people toward him. He was 28, tall and effortlessly charming. From the outside, Ethan seemed to fit seamlessly into the world. But lately something had changed. The easy charm was giving way to something darker. His mood swings were more frequent, his once protective attitude toward Sam starting to feel suffocating. He watched her too closely, his intensity rising with each passing day. It was subtle at first, glances that lingered a beat too long, hands that brushed against each other accidentally but felt like they held too much weight. Sam couldn't ignore it anymore. Ethan was always around, always watching her, and it had begun to unnerve her. What had once been a harmless connection between them now felt like something else entirely. The tension between them was undeniable, even if neither of them dared to name it. They exchanged awkward conversations in passing, always careful not to let their eyes linger in front of their parents. But when they were alone, it was different. In those moments, the air between them thickened with unspoken words and emotions they couldn't control. It had been 2 years since their parents married, but the house had never felt like a home. If anything, the marriage only deepened the cracks in their already fragile family. And as Sam sat on the edge of her bed, sketching absent-mindedly, she could feel Ethan's eyes on her from the doorway, his presence a shadow she couldn't escape. The unspoken truth between them weighed heavily, and Sam knew it wouldn't stay hidden forever. The beginning had been innocent enough. When their parents first married, Sam and Ethan had done what most step-siblings do. They tried to make the best of it. At first, their relationship was cordial but distant, marked by polite conversation and brief exchanges about their shared situation. Sam was withdrawn, finding refuge in her art, while Ethan navigated the change with his usual charm. They weren't close, but there was no animosity between them either. It wasn't until that first Thanksgiving, 6 months after their parents' wedding, that things began to shift. The holiday had started out well enough, but as the night dragged on, Cheryl grew irritable, pouring herself glass after glass of wine, while Sam's father retreated to his office for work. The tension at the dinner table grew unbearable, so Sam slipped away, seeking refuge on the back porch. She sat there, wrapped in her jacket, staring out into the cold November night, feeling more alone than ever. Ethan found her there. He didn't say much at first, just sat down beside her, the quiet night surrounding them. They shared a silence that wasn't awkward, just heavy with the weight of what they both felt but never talked about. "It's weird, isn't it?" Ethan had finally said, his voice low. "This whole thing, like we're all just pretending to be this perfect family." Sam nodded, grateful for the understanding. "Yeah, it feels off, like we're all playing a part." From that moment, something shifted between them. They started talking more, spending more time together in the quiet corners of the house, away from their parents. They bonded over the shared experience of feeling like outsiders in their own home. Sam's father was too busy with work to notice her withdrawal, and Cheryl was too focused on maintaining appearances to care about what was happening behind closed doors. Ethan became Sam's escape. They'd stay up late, talking about everything from their frustrations with their parents to their hopes of getting out of the house and starting fresh somewhere far away. For the first time in a long while, Sam felt like someone understood her, someone who saw beyond the quiet exterior she presented to the world. But over time, their connection deepened into something more. Neither of them could pinpoint the exact moment it changed, but it did. A glance lingered too long, a touch held too much meaning. It was during a family trip to the lake, about a year after their parents married, that everything shifted. They had spent the day hiking, their parents oblivious to the growing closeness between them. That evening, as the sun set and everyone else went to bed, Sam and Ethan found themselves alone by the water. Sitting side by side, the tension between them was almost unbearable. Sam could feel it in the air, like something had been building for months, waiting to be acknowledged. When Ethan leaned in and kissed her, it wasn't a surprise. What was surprising was how right it felt, even as Sam's mind screamed at her that it was wrong. That first kiss was followed by others, each one more dangerous, more forbidden than the last. Afterward, Sam was flooded with guilt. She knew it was wrong, that whatever was happening between them couldn't continue. But Ethan didn't seem to share her hesitation. He brushed aside her concerns, telling her that no one else could understand them, that what they had was special, unique. His words comforted her, even as her own doubts gnawed at the back of her mind. As the months passed, their relationship grew more intense, more secretive. They would steal moments alone when they could, hiding their connection from the outside world. Sam hated the secrecy, the constant fear of being discovered, but she couldn't pull away. Ethan had become her anchor in a world that felt increasingly unstable. But Ethan's love was becoming possessive. He began to isolate her, growing more controlling with each passing day. He would get angry when she talked to other men, accusing her of not being committed to them. Sam tried to reason with him, but Ethan's paranoia was growing. He watched her constantly, his once protective nature now suffocating. The easy charm that had once drawn her in was replaced by an intensity that frightened her. By the time summer turned to fall, Sam felt trapped. The house that had once been her sanctuary now felt like a prison, and Ethan was the guard. He had become increasingly erratic, convinced that someone would discover their secret. The more paranoid he became, the more he pressed Sam to run away with him. "We can't stay here forever, Sam," he would say late at night when they were alone. "They'll find out eventually, and then it's all over. We have to leave, just you and me. We can start fresh somewhere far away where no one knows us." Ethan made it sound so simple, so romantic, but Sam wasn't sure anymore. She had started to see the cracks in Ethan's facade, the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. His possessiveness had become suffocating, his need for control overwhelming. And yet Sam couldn't bring herself to fully pull away. There was a part of her that still believed in the version of Ethan she had first fallen for, the one who understood her in a way no one else ever had. They planned to leave on a Friday night in late October, when their parents would be away for a weekend trip. Ethan had everything mapped out. He'd pack the car with their bags. They'd leave just after midnight, and by morning, they'd be miles away, free from the world that had trapped them for so long. It was supposed to be the perfect escape. But as the night approached, Sam's doubts grew stronger. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that leaving with Ethan was a mistake. His behavior had become increasingly unpredictable, his temper flaring at the slightest provocation. Sam had thought about telling someone, her best friend maybe, or even her stepmother, but the thought of what Ethan might do if he found out kept her silent. The night of their planned escape was unusually cold for October, the wind howling outside as the clock ticked toward midnight. Sam sat on the edge of her bed, her backpack packed and ready by the door. Ethan was downstairs, pacing in the living room, as he always did when he was anxious. Sam could hear his footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoing through the house. Her heart raced as she stared at the door. She could feel the weight of the decision she was about to make pressing down on her, the uncertainty of what lay ahead suffocating her. Part of her wanted to run, to leave Ethan behind and disappear into the night on her own. But another part of her was terrified. Terrified of what Ethan would do if she left him. Terrified of the unknown. At 11:30, Sam made up her mind. She couldn't do it. Not like this. Driven by fear and uncertainty, Sam decided to back out of their plan at the last moment. She quietly repacked her things, leaving the suitcase Ethan had seen in her room untouched, hoping to make him believe she was still on board. She grabbed her essentials, shoved them into a small backpack, and prepared to slip out of the house without him. It was her only chance. The house was quiet now, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards under Ethan's pacing. Sam tiptoed down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest, as she reached for the front door. She held her breath, trying to steady her shaking hands, and slowly turned the handle. But just as she opened the door, a voice behind her froze her in place. "Where are you going, Sam?" Ethan's voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it that sent chills down her spine. She turned slowly, her heart sinking as she saw him standing at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes locked on her. His face was blank, but there was something dangerous in the way he stood, like a predator cornering its prey. I'm just getting some air," Sam stammered, trying to think of an excuse, but she knew it was useless. Ethan wasn't stupid. "You're leaving me," he said, his voice low and cold. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, as if he had already pieced everything together. "You were going to leave without me." Sam shook her head, but the guilt was already written all over her face. "No, Ethan, I wasn't." "Don't lie to me," he snapped, taking a step toward her, his eyes flashing with anger. "You think I'm stupid? You think I haven't noticed how distant you've been? You were going to run, weren't you? Leave me behind like I'm nothing." Sam's heart raced as she backed up against the door, her hands trembling. "Ethan, please," she whispered. "I wasn't going to leave you. I need space." "Space?" Ethan's voice was full of venom now. "You want space? After everything I've done for you? I gave up everything for you, Sam. I thought we were in this together. I thought you loved me." "I do love you," Sam said, her voice breaking. "But this isn't right. We can't keep doing this. It's wrong, Ethan. We're not supposed to be together like this." "Not supposed to be?" Ethan laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Who cares what we're supposed to be? You think anyone else matters? It's just you and me, Sam. It's always been just you and me." Sam could feel the panic rising in her chest as Ethan's words grew more erratic, more desperate. "Ethan, please, let me go," she begged, her voice trembling. "We can talk about this, but I can't do this anymore." "You're not leaving me," Ethan growled, his hands balling into fists. "You're not leaving me, Sam. Not like this." Before Sam could react, Ethan lunged at her, grabbing her by the arm and yanking her back into the house. She struggled against him, her heart racing as she fought to free herself from his grip, but he was too strong. His face was twisted with anger, his eyes wild with betrayal. "You lied to me," he hissed, his breath hot against her skin. "You were going to leave me, weren't you?" Sam shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, Ethan, please." But he wasn't listening anymore. His grip tightened on her arm, his rage consuming him. Without thinking, he reached for the kitchen counter, where the knife from earlier in the night still sat, gleaming in the dim light. "Ethan, no!" Sam screamed, but it was too late. In a flash of movement, Ethan grabbed the knife and plunged it into Sam's side. She gasped, her eyes wide with shock as the pain coursed through her body. She stumbled backward, clutching at the wound, her blood seeping through her fingers. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Ethan stood frozen, the knife still in his hand, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked down at Sam, at the blood pooling on the floor beneath her, as if he couldn't comprehend what he had just done. "Sam," he whispered, his voice breaking. I didn't mean to. But Sam was already crumpling to the floor, her vision blurring as the darkness closed in around her. She tried to speak, to call out to him, but the words wouldn't come. All she could feel was the coldness of the floor beneath her and the weight of the secret that had destroyed them both. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the house on Cedarwood Lane was silent. The chaos of the night before had given way to a terrible stillness, the kind of silence that comes after a storm. Ethan sat on the floor next to Sam's lifeless body, his mind numb with shock. He had been sitting there for hours, staring at the blood on his hands, unable to move, unable to think. In the light of day, everything seemed unreal. The house that had once been their prison was now a tomb, a place marked by violence and betrayal. Ethan looked down at Sam, her face pale and still, and felt a wave of guilt so overwhelming it nearly crushed him. He had done this. He had taken her life, the one person who had ever understood him, the one person he had ever truly loved. But he couldn't live without her. He couldn't bear the thought of facing the world without her by his side. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had no future without Sam. Everything they had planned, everything they had dreamed of, was gone. With trembling hands, Ethan reached for a piece of paper and a pen from the kitchen counter. He scrawled a note, his handwriting shaky and uneven, trying to explain what he couldn't fully comprehend himself. It was short, barely coherent, but it was all he had left. "I'm sorry, I couldn't let her leave. We were supposed to be together. Always." Ethan placed the note next to Sam's body, then picked up the knife. His hands shook as he pressed the blade to his skin, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He didn't hesitate. He couldn't. In one swift motion, he drove the knife into his own chest, collapsing beside Sam as the darkness closed in. It was 9 a.m. when their parents returned home. Sam's father and Cheryl had no reason to expect anything unusual. The house looked the same as it always had, quiet, peaceful, untouched by the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. But as soon as they stepped inside, Cheryl froze. The metallic scent of blood hit her first, followed by the sight of the bodies on the floor. Her scream echoed through the house, shattering the silence. Sam's father rushed forward, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. His daughter and stepson lying in a pool of blood, the knife still clutched in Ethan's hand, and a note scrawled on the floor beside them. What happened? Cheryl's voice trembled as she stood in the doorway, her face pale and her hands shaking. Why would they? Neither of them understood. They couldn't see the web of secrets and lies that had been building between Sam and Ethan for months. But as the police arrived and began to search the house, the clues started to emerge. Old messages between the two of them, hidden love letters, pieces of a puzzle that no one had known existed. The once peaceful house on Cedarwood Lane was now a crime scene. The police tape draped across the front door was a stark reminder of the violence that had torn the family apart. The home that had been carefully maintained, where every detail had been meticulously tended to, was now empty, haunted by the secrets it had failed to contain. In the end, it wasn't the love that destroyed them, but the secrecy. What had started as an innocent connection between two lost souls had become something darker, something consuming. The line between love and obsession had blurred, and in that blurred space, control took root. Ethan's love for Sam had turned into a need to possess her, to keep her close no matter the cost. And Sam, trapped by her own guilt and fear, had been unable to escape until it was too late. The house, once a symbol of family and unity, now stood as a testament to the dangers of what is hidden beneath the surface. The perfect facade had masked the cracks that had been growing for months, until they finally split open in one final, violent act. The secrets that Sam and Ethan had kept, the lies they had told themselves and each other, had festered in the darkness, growing into something uncontrollable. As the days passed and the media descended on the quiet neighborhood, the true extent of Sam and Ethan's relationship became public. Their parents, devastated and confused, struggled to understand how things had gone so wrong. How had they missed the signs? How had they not seen what was happening right under their noses? But the truth was simple. They hadn't wanted to see. They had been so focused on maintaining the appearance of a perfect family, on keeping up with the neighbors and pretending everything was fine, that they had ignored the warning signs, the stolen glances, the quiet conversations, the tension that had simmered beneath the surface. It had all been there, if only they had looked. Now, all that was left was silence. The house, once full of life, was empty, its rooms echoing with the memory of what had been lost. The once perfect family was shattered, torn apart by the very secrets they had tried so hard to keep hidden. And in the end, it wasn't the love that had killed them. It was the lies.